Okay, so hi everyone, comrades and friends. Thank you for joining us this evening. All our speakers are here with us today. Once again, salam perjuangan and warm welcome to comrades and friends to Socialism 2021. My name is Nalini. I'm from Parti Socialist Malaysia, and I'm your moderator for this session. This would be the final session for today. The title Dictatorship, Fascism, and Authoritarianism, Challenging the Far Right Today. Comrades and friends, Socialism 2021 co-organized by Parti Socialist Malaysia, Socialist Workers Thailand, Partido Lakas Ang Masa Philippines, Socialist Alliance Australia, Partai Rakyat Pekerja Indonesia, and Kesatuan Perjuangan Rakyat Indonesia. Comrades and friends, as always, before I start the session today, there are a couple of house rules. First of all, the interpretation service is available for those who need it. You can find it in Malay, Indonesian, Mandarin, and Thai languages. Number two, all participants are requested to respect differences in views and opinions. You can post your question in Q&A box. Just click on it and you can post your questions or raise your hands when you want to speak. Q&A is not for debates, but for asking questions only. Please post questions in a short and specific manner to the respective panel for their views. And finally, we will not tolerate any derogatory, racist remarks, sexist, or vulgar postings in the chat, and the organizers have right to remove such participants if they are found to do so. So comrade, let's start our session today. This is a very relevant and very important topic for the current context, especially the post-pandemic. Just to give a bit of background, especially in the context of Southeast Asia and for the topic today. Comrades, the coup in Myanmar feels like a relic of the South Asian past when men in uniform roamed a vast dictator's playground. But it also brings home how a region once celebrated for its transformative people's power revolutions like against Suharto of Indonesia and Marcos of the Philippines has been sliding back into autocracy. National regimes have increasingly employed the state apparatus like judicial, legislative, executive, and military to pursue and consolidate authoritarian governance. Seems like the authoritarian rule is synonym to politics in Southeast Asian countries and has been a mainstay of political life in Southeast Asia. The region has instead proven to be an ideal, yet relatively underappreciated testing ground for theories of authoritarian politics, like flawed elections, repressions, and fierce continuity of ruling parties, the enduring characteristic of authoritarian rule in the region. We also have a situation where the vigilante groups that are highly fascinated and motivated by the idea of fascism is growing. We have new challenges where this phenomenon are not just offline politics, but also online, where social media and internet are being used to communicate, to organize, and to mobilize these vigilante groups. A crucial question to us will be in how far this will lead toward political polarization. At the heart of all these political changes is the rise of the right-wing political and ideological forces to use religious, race, ethnic, and all nationalist ideas to build coalitions which are hostile to pluralistic politics and society. And the trend is combined with deepening neoliberal market reform agenda within the authoritarian framework. So how can the socialist, the left, and the working class movements fight back and advance under these conditions? To discuss this topic today, comrades, please join me to welcome our speakers. Our first speaker for today is Comrade Dimitri Dewi Putra, represented Indonesian Young Greens to the first Partai Hijau Indonesia Presidium, an experienced professional in the private sector and civil society organizations. His beginnings in green politics begin when he joined the Green Student Movement organized by Wahana Lingkungan Hidup Indonesia. Dimitri worked closely with urban poor and corporation movement in Jakarta to promote social and ecological justice. Welcome, comrade. Our second speaker for today, Comrade Somyot Pruk Saka Samsuk, I'm sorry if it was wrong, started out as an activist while in university. He then became a labor activist to support worker struggle in various factories, founded a trade union for democracy under socialist perspective, campaigned for the establishment of the Social Security Act, minimum wage rises, and women's rights. Somyot worked as an editor of a political magazine from 2006 to oppose the dictatorship until he was prosecuted for lèse majesté in 2011. Consequently, he was imprisoned for 7 years and was released in 2018. He proceeded to resume fighting for political change and was prosecuted for political incitement and lèse majesté again in 2021. He's currently the leader of the 24th June Democracy Group, which calls for democracy and the establishment of welfare state. Welcome, Comrade Somyot. And finally, our Comrade Manjete Lopez is the national president of the multi-sectoral organization San Lakas and the vice president of the Freedom from Debt Coalition. She's a long-term leader of the Philippine left who fought against and survived the Marcos dictatorship. Speakers, you will be given 20 to 25 minutes and followed by Q&A. Please keep to your time given, and I'll remind all of you 10 minutes before your time's end. So I pass the floor to Dimitri Putra.
Hello, thank you, Dalini, for the introduction. Hi, everybody. Good evening here in Jakarta. I'm really happy to be able to share with you how, as Dalini said, in Indonesia we had the Reformacy, and it's quite incredible back then. But in reality, right now in Indonesia, we face quite tough challenge, and we still had a kind of sublime authoritarianism regime that currently running the government, and I guess it's better to me to share a presentation with all of you so it could be easier to describe the situation. Okay, now you can see my screen, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. Okay, so
Dimitri, maybe, yeah, okay. Fine.
Okay, so to start today's conversation, I would like to begin with the story of Indonesian authoritarianism right now. So for the past 50 years, I believe that Indonesian authoritarianism, fascism, and dictatorship has already transformed. So it's evolving from one state to another. So if people say that Indonesia is currently the largest democracy in the world, or the third largest democracy in the world, with the election held every 5 years, but in reality, that authoritarianism is still here, and it become evolving toward a more sublime approach, which is you can see on the image on the right. So it's showing that the painters are painting Suharto's face, but reflecting based on Jokowi's figure. So we're still on the same situation as the Orde Baru, but it's the only difference is that right now we feel that we have the civil freedom, we have the democracy, but in other hand, things are still in place. If you're going to have a demonstration or a protest, you need to report first to the police, and if you don't get the permit, you cannot have the demonstration or protest. Or if you do it without the permit, so the police can easily get you and put you in jail. So that kind of thing are still happening, and that is just a simple use case that I can share. But in many cases, in many areas, we can see on Kendang, people are persecuted, people are suppressed because they are protecting their land. There is just yesterday, there is several groups going to the environment ministry in Indonesia. They are protesting because government are creating a coal-based power plant in Sumatera Utara, and they got suppressed, and they've been taken to the jail because they are doing the protest. So that kind of things still happen right now, and that kind of things are happening under so-called civil and democratic government. So that is why we can say that the authoritarianism is just evolving from one state to another, and it's still in place. So that is the issue that we're currently having in Indonesia. So even as you know that Reformacy is the effort from late 70s to late 90s activism, all groups are fighting for the same cause. They are fighting to get democracy. They are fighting to gain what we've had previously, because democracy at first are installed by the civic government in 45, but in the 60s there is the new regime or the Orde Baru that are replacing it with what they called as a guided Pancasila democracy, guided democracy, and so on. And that's when the problems come, and that is when everything are covered with the agenda to make sure that Indonesia have a political stability, social stability, and economic stability. But the problem is, on that time, before Reformacy, people are persecuted, people are easily repressed. I guess all of you already know that Indonesia at that time, there is eyes and ears everywhere. You cannot criticize the government, and a lot of activists, maybe a lot of friends that are caught or missing or become the victim of that regime. But as on Reformacy, we gain and we win, and we get this. I guess this is just three main agenda from Reformacy. First is abolishing the dual function of armed force, which is already happening right now. If there is no armed force officers can have a political office, but the effort is already shown, because in several cases we see that the current government are trying to install several high-ranking armed force officers to be the acting head of acting governor in several provinces. We see in previously there is an high-ranking military officer in several states, and also some high-ranking police officer in several provinces. So things still happening, but it's different with back then. Back then they are having a specific seat in the DPR, but right now, the democratic elect government and those civil run government are forced to give space to the armed force, so armed force won't hurt in any way to the civil run government. So in that sense, even though we abolish the dual function of armed force, but it's still happening right now, and we doesn't know, because in 2024 there will be like maybe in 2022 to 2024 there will be several provinces that doesn't have any democratic elect governor, and the main possibility is the Indonesian government will choose high-ranking military officer, high-ranking police officer to be the acting governor. So that's happening, and even though we already abolished the dual function, that's just one case how the authoritarianism in Indonesia is still in place, even though we have the Reformasi. Second, enforcing law supremacy. Yes, indeed, right now you cannot go easily like back then. There is a patrus penembak misterius. You're not doing anything wrong, but people can shoot you and so on. But today, people are using the law as a tool. So in many cases, we had a lot of persecution. Back then, in 2019, I really remember there is a musician named Ananda Badudu. He's helping the youth movement back then, the university students that are protesting in the case of Reformasi di Korupsi in 2019. He's organizing a crowdfunding to fundraise to help the agenda of Reformasi di Korupsi. In order to do that, he worked with a crowdfunding platform and raised like maybe 500 million rupiah to 700 million rupiah, which is a quite huge amount for a social movement like this. I guess it's quite an achievement back then, and it's still, because to have that kind of support is quite tough, right? You get 700 million rupiah. It's almost like 100,000 it's around 100,000. It's just like it's around $7,000 to $50,000, which is it's quite a huge amount to, for the Reformasi the corruption movement. But the police take Ananda Badudu by force, and using law, the UU ITE, which is quite controversial law in Indonesia, to take him and to persecute him. So, you know, yes, there is a law supremacy in place, but it's being used by the oligarch or this authoritarianism regime to get us. So even though that there is law in place, is something wrong. And the last thing is the prosecuting Suharto and his cronies. Yes, a lot of Suharto cronies and Suharto itself is prosecuted, but still, most of them right now are being the oligarch running in the background. So these three agenda, back then in 90s, we see it's a cool agenda. It's really great. But in reality, right now, my generation, we're still facing the same problem, but with a milder approach, because they are a democratically elect government. So it's not dictator. They are democratically elect. We elect them, but the problem are who's running background. So on that, I have this hypothesis. But I guess this is what when we talk about evolution from one stage to one phase to another, we can see that from Orde Baru, you can see on I guess on my side on the left, there is an Orde Baru with Suharto, Wiranto, Prabowo, Akbar Tanjung, Faisal, Abu Rizal Bakri, and Surya Paloh, which is all of them are now having their own political party. Back then they are part of Golkar, Suharto's party, and now we have that they are evolving toward an oligarch-run government. So I would like to say that what we have right now, they are democratically elect, but they are run by oligarch. As you can see that you can see all the ties between Jokowi and Ma'ruf, Prabowo and Sandi to all this oligarch. You know, there is Abu Rizal Bakri behind Jokowi, there is Surya Paloh, there is Yusuf Kala and so on. And in terms of Prabowo, you can see there is Hasim and so on. There is also Wiranto, Surya Paloh. So the same people are running the different government, a civil and democratically elect government, but they come from the same source. They come from Orde Baru, Partai Golkar, those we know corrupted and create all of this chaos. And if you go deeper, you can see that all these people who have that authoritarianism values are still in place, and like the government are giving them impunity, so they can still run the government even though they are alleged for human rights abuse and so on. And that's the fact. That's the fact that Reformasi can get us higher. And as I already said previously, that this oligarch-run government producing two situations that's really bad. So on the left, you can see it's the Reformasi corruption, thousands of students, and it's, I guess it's the whole movement, whole people are marching toward our parliamentary building, but they are getting suppressed. And in many cases, they are targeting students that goes around the area. So in that case, we have that story that students using uniform that goes around the parliamentary building area are taken by the police without any warrant, without any background. Why? Because they're just going around. But because the police fear that these students are going to join the protest, they are being captured. They are taken to and put into jail by saying they are going to provoke. They are going an anarchism and vandal activities, but in fact they are not. So that is what happening right now in Indonesia. On the left one, it is the newest case. There is Fatia from Kontras and Haris Azhar from Lokataru. Both of them are having, Haris Azhar having quite fame right now because he's quite famous in YouTube. He got he got a weekly program that interview with activists and many person. And in one of those interviews, he interviewed Fathia from Kontras and talk about Luhut Binsar Panjaitan. And in that session, Fathia and Haris mentioned Luhut and calling his opung, this opung lord and so on. And Luhut get irritated because of that. And so Luhut are are alleging Fathia and Haris of discrimination and using the ITE, which is really controversial, to so the police can prosecute him. So that's what we're having right now in the oligarch government. So my point is, what I'm trying to say is that even though that we already overthrown the dictator, Suharto is a dictator, the authoritarianism, we already overthrown him. But the problem is the agenda of Reformasi is not enough. You can see that our government, Indonesia government, is still run by this oligarch who gain control, who gain access to capital resources, who gain access to political resources, social capital, and so on, and they are utilizing it. And as you know, other than this issue, we also know that the right, the conservative Muslim groups are being utilized by this oligarch. So they use religion issue as one of the tools to maintain order, to maintain their status quo. And this is really worrisome because in 2024 here in Indonesia, we're facing several issues. The first one is that there is a plan or an assumption that Jokowi will run for the third term, which is it's really bad. And he got all the necessities, he got all the requirements to make that happen. He got the control in the parliament, he got the control in the government and the executive government, so he can pass a constitution reform which can extend his maximum term not just to 2 terms maximum, but to 3, 4, or maybe, I don't know, unlimited terms, as long as elected by the election. But this already happening with the oligarch run government. This is also a lesson learned, not only for Indonesia, but I guess for many part in Southeast Asia, because I guess in Southeast Asia we face always the same characteristic, always the same problem. And like I said, Reformasi isn't enough, because we've not just seen this in Indonesia. We see it in Myanmar. The NLD and all the effort to democratize Myanmar failed because we do things that aren't enough. We just focus on reforming. We just focus to install democracy. We just focus to to manage things, but we're not eradicating the authoritarianism itself. We're not eradicate that, and that the issue is when that's still in place, anything could happen. Even the worst case scenario is like in Myanmar. There is a junta, and that's a typical when the military is still in power. In Indonesia, it's quite low, or quite it's not high. The military doesn't have that enough power, but there is a possibilities of they are maybe doing a coup or a junta, and there's also possibilities, but it's not that huge possibilities. But like what I want to say, that we need a revolution, which is the reason why socialism, working class, the left, in this case myself, the Greens, need to be united, and we need to focus more on making sure that the citizens, the people, are prepared to run a revolution and to change the systemic or this chronic disease of authoritarianism and the chronic disease of dictatorship that are always be our problem. So I guess that's all from me. I guess it is better to discuss more and to talk about what's happening not only in Indonesia, I guess, because it's an issue that we face by whole Southeast Asia. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dimitri, for your presentation and for sharing with us what's happening in Indonesia, and also reinforcing the fact that we're not doing good, but we're doing really bad in the region. I move on to the second speaker, Comrade Somyot. Over to you.
Yes, thank you very much for joining this session. I would like to present our Thai state has developed a capitalist economy that is monopoly capitalism, causing the economic crisis and inequality between the rich and the poor. The development of monopoly capitalism also creates a totalitarian state with absolute capitalism, also making powers, resources can be allocated for the effective accumulation of a wealth of monopolistic capital in the long term. It should to ignore short-term pleasure from the laborers, the poor, or the private sectors. The authoritarian state prioritizes the capitalist futures different from democracy, which respond more to the needs of the people. Monopoly capital groups that grew from the domination and use of ancient body of state has used the military and bureaucracy to make a military coup, create a totalitarian state to facilitate the growth of monopoly capitalism and destroy free competitions, causing conflict with liberal capitalist group that use election as a means to take the state power. It had led to a current of struggle between the old monarchy capital and the new capital, leading to the growth of a new generation of people. Most of them are the students in university and the high school who are disappointed with their authoritarian politics. They want to change to the liberal democracy and as well as the new society that they dream for. Dictatorships use security laws and use the judiciary as a tool to legitimize the repressions. Military force, police, courts, criminal courts, and prisons can be used to use violence to arrest, detain, and kill people who demand freedom and democracy. Amidst the spread of the coronavirus, the authoritarian state took opportunity to enforce the emergency decree. The decree prohibits people to gather or organize. It will prosecute them. This is a difficulty for the people uniting and fighting as well. Challenge and the way forward to the new society that at present, a variety of solutions for the capitalism are proposed in society, ranking from the degree to which capitalism can be appropriately changed, including anti-environmental destructions, promotion of rights and freedom of laborers and trade unions, movement to build a welfare state, including democratic socialism, that is an economy of cooperation and centralized production planning, is need to build a political party representing working class and peasants in order to create a new democratic state powers to replace the capitalist economy and authoritarian state. First, we have to restore the class consciousness of working class and to establish of the trade union that go beyond the enterprise union to be industrial unions and general unions that includes on working people. Second, network and international solidarity in the fight for the promotion of regional wages and cooperation among regional and international trade unions in order to create the bargaining power of the working class in the regions. Third, form a class alliance to create a political party of workers' peasants to build democratic regimes that can strengthening people's movement. Fourth, assemble with a new generation of the people, especially with the student movement, to plan a long-term fight against capitalism and fight for democratic politics by reforming the army to be smaller, laws, justice, and education systems, and by liberating the new generation to create a new alternative against capitalism and to create an equal society like freedom and democracy in the economic, social, and the political respect. And now the young people with the trade union movement now, they form the alliance to demand to reform the capitalist monarchy so that the Thai people in society can enjoy with the freedom, equality, and the standard of working class. So this movement starts struggling from last year and continue to this year. And many of us, especially the young students, were being detained and now become the political prisoner. More than 25 people who are now detained by the less majority law or Article 112 that Thai people now, together with the young generation, move forward to abolish this law so that we can have more open space to fight against the old monopolistic capitalism in Thai society. So I hope this is enough for this session. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Comrade Somyot. Thank you so much. It was a short presentation, but I think there's a lot of issues that you have covered. And I think one takeaway that you were mentioning just now is like one way to fight the authoritarianism and also monopolistic capitalism in Thailand, for example. And I think it's applied to everyone in this region. It's like to consolidate students and younger generations to fight against it. And I think it's a very, very important for a movement as well. Thank you again. Comrades and friends, please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A box. And then also if you have any questions after that you want to ask live questions, and just let me know, then I'll call your name and they will allow you to speak. So feel free to give your comments, questions, or anything. Now I'm moving on to our third speaker, Comrade Manjete. Over to you.
Thank you, Nalini. Is it okay for me to share screen?
Yes, the technical team will allow you. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just fix this. Okay. I just go through it, and I hope I don't take too much of your time. So I'll start with the neoliberal growth framework had all but run its course as meltdown after meltdown in the global economy led to the 2008 financial crisis, descending into a worldwide economic decline that is now culminating in what has been described as the Second Great Depression when the COVID pandemic struck us in 2020. In this part, I'm trying to capture the essential feature of the multiple crisis and its consequence. And I'm just saying that even before the pandemic, the global economy was already experiencing the economic downturns and decline, even before the pandemic. And now, with the pandemic and the lockdowns, it was like in 2020, the entire global economy for a period between March and July, almost stood still. This brought down the entire economy to its knees. Protectionism, but before this, protectionism stopped multilateral trade and investment alliance and initiatives were now replaced by trade wars, and the rebound of debt crisis and bankruptcy afflicting countries, especially in the global north, had become the order of the day. Even then, the Washington Consensus, which was the beginning of the consensus over the neoliberal framework, before I used to say the Washington Consensus is dead. Even before the pandemic, the Washington Consensus died. The neoliberalism marginalized and disenfranchised the great majority of the people, the working class, the poor and deprived sectors of society. It spawned social inequality, the widening gap between the rich, who have been reduced to less than 1%, though so much richer, and the poor within and among countries. Consequently, social unrest, that means protest actions, especially among the workers and farmers and the youth, have erupted in countries in both the global north and the south in recent years, even before the pandemic. Heading off the global economic downturn, the historic accumulation of greenhouse gas emissions brought about extreme weather conditions and climate change that has in the last few decades brought danger and destruction to human and living existence and the entire planet. As per IPCC report before COP26, we are running out of time to prevent this from reaching catastrophic levels. The climate change crisis was there even before the pandemic. But now, with the recent result of the studies, we don't, if before we had up to 2030 to turn around the situation so that the planet temperature will not reach 2%, or will not exceed 1.5%. IPCC is now saying that we only have up to 2025. That's a few more years from now, before we exceed 1.5 if we do not turn things around as far as greenhouse gas emissions are concerned. The rise of the new far right in both the global north and south dovetails the conditions of multiple crises of capitalism, as in the ascendance of the dictatorships in the 70s, during another period of economic crunch wrought by the financial crisis and policy shifts to address that crisis. I refer to the financial crisis, which led to the scuttling of the Bretton Woods agreements before the 1970s, and in 1971, uh, um, the dollar was replaced by replaced gold as a reserve uh, that uh, that carried the weight of the strength of economies, and this is one of the uh, measures undertaken by the United States to be able to penetrate and dominate in much of investment and trade in the world. With that, the 70s saw the imposition of martial law and dictatorships of the likes of Marcos in the Philippines, Pinochet in Chile, Suharto in Indonesia, Park Chung-hee in South Korea, all ruling for as long as 20 to 30 years. In recent years, we have Bolsonaro in Brazil, Modi in India, Duterte in the Philippines, and more recently, the military coup in Myanmar. Then, of course, in the global north, you find Donald Trump in the United States, Macron in France, and Boris Johnson in the United Kingdom. This occurrence, the rise of these presidents and prime ministers came along with the fits and starts of the neoliberal frame in the past 2 to 3 decades. And for the Philippines, Duterte was the answer to the clamor of the middle class that were threatened, who felt threatened that the peace and order situation, the insurgency problem, was getting out of control in as far as their safety and the stability of the economy was concerned. In the 70s, the left in these countries took the lead in organizing mass struggles of the workers, peasants, and other democratic forces, and shaping the anti-fascist dictatorship mass movements. These movements succeeded in bringing down these dictatorships, even if short of replacing them with workers or people's democratic governments. As in the Philippines, when Marcos declared martial law, many of the opposition parties, opposition to Marcos, had taken flight, and it was the mass activities of workers, the urban poor, and farmers that was able to trigger or effect the resurgence of a people's mass movement by way of asserting their rights or defending their rights, the right to strike and the right to organize. These mass actions and these mass movements steadily developed and into a political movement, an anti-dictatorship movement. And it took all of, I think, more than 15 years to spread nationwide and to become a powerful movement, enough for even those politicians who fled to come back and find hope in the advance of the anti-Marcos dictatorship efforts, so that after 20 years, to what we now call the People Power Revolution in EDSA in the Philippines, Marcos and his dictatorship and all his cronies were brought down. I am very sure that in some countries in Asia, and I do know that the workers and farmers movement have also kept alive and pushed the resistance in their countries against authoritarian and fascist rule. So that I think by the time we were able to bring down Marcos, the comrades, along with the rest of the workers and farmers movements, were able to, if not bring down, force down the authoritarian rulers in their countries. However, in the Philippines, rather than succeed in replacing this Marcos dictatorship with a people's democratic government, the liberal democratic elite, the liberal democratic elite politicians succeeded in leading and dominating the setting up of government after Marcos was overthrown. Much like Dimitri's regret that when Suharto was finally removed, a liberal democratic government was set up, not quite as democratic as the people had hoped would be set up after Suharto. And after, that was in 1986, after Marcos, and there were three administrations that followed. No, three administrations of elite democratic representation. And that was before Duterte finally came in to establish a more unabashed and more direct authoritarian means of rule, or authoritarian rule, even going as far as declaring martial law in certain parts of the country, martial law again in certain parts of the country, and coming out with executive orders or presidential decrees that weaponized these executive orders in order to undertake repression and militarization, no different from the kind of repression and militarization that we experienced under Marcos. And it culminates in the passage of, and of all times, last year in the middle of pandemic, the passage of what is now called the anti-terror law, similar to many anti-terror laws that have recently been passed, even in France. I'm not sure. Maybe later you can share with us, Dimitri, if that is existing in Indonesia. Proceed. The significance of the collapse of real socialism in Russia and Eastern Europe to the left at large is very important for us. It was a period of debates and discourse, review and reevaluation of theory and practice, a period of fragmentation, recalibration. In Europe and South America, electoral victories of assertion and building, but also of challenges, of compromises with the neoliberal framework, and declines and then failures. But the left has persisted through the years. I remember after, I'm mentioning this now as a factor to a question regarding what is the factor behind the rise of the a new far right, even after the advance of the struggles of the people. One, of course, is it's a question of balance. It is a question of, simply put, the ruling class continues to retain their hold on state power, and the other is the other side of this is that the left has not been able to advance beyond for example, in the Philippines, just removing Marcos and losing out to the liberal democratic rule of the subsequent administrations, losing out to the elite in terms of being able to establish government. And this number 6 is one factor, the conditions that the left was experiencing, and this is not just in the Philippines, but worldwide. It was and I dare say it has been a long period until the last decade, where the left continued to be fragmented, and at some point, the discourse of whether it's important or not to be able to capture state power persisted, especially in the beginning, and it was a theme of the World Social Forum that occurred in the 80s. That went on in the 80s into the 90s. However, the multiple crises of today, the multiple crisis of capitalism today, is like no other. Neoliberalism is dying, if not dead already, and capitalism and all its institutions are hard put to put it back together again, much less bring back better, which is a slogan of capitalism, global capitalism today. Current measures through preserving and pursuing financialization can only beget deeper crises, and this is the measure that the multilateral institutions, economic institutions, are taking in as far as shoring up and driving for recovery after the consequence of pandemic. This can only beget deeper crisis as the global economy face the prospect of more meltdowns, hyperinflation, and worse, stagflation. The COVID-19 virus doesn't plan on becoming endemic anytime soon, at most for the next 3 more years. And as the new COP26 results indicate, capitalism will continue to fiddle around with decisive measures to curtail GHG, greenhouse gas emissions, as the clock ticks nearer to catastrophe. The left has its work cut out for us, and we must not let this juncture pass with capitalism at its most vulnerable. The race to replace dying or dead neoliberalism is on. With the far right in place at this time, we have our job cut out for us. The great majority of the people, the working class, are experiencing the brunt of economic recession, facing the direst of working and living conditions. Even in the midst of the pandemic, there have been massive protest actions happening. The yellow vests in France, the spate of strikes of the workers in America, the millions of farmers in India, the anti-fascist resistance in Myanmar and the Philippines, the youth climate strikes all around the globe. The left must take its place with the working class in the struggles for survival, organize the political struggle to resist, fight authoritarian fascist rule, and to challenge the ruling government and parties, push for system change by advancing the alternative socialist program and by building not just fronts for struggle, but organs of governance of the working class as well, at all levels. Let us foster proletarian internationalism in addressing the multiple crises of capitalism in our struggles and in advancing our socialist alternative and endeavor to build a socialist international. Changes in and this is an addendum actually, changes in the geopolitical alliances and balance inevitably dovetailed the global economic crisis and shifts. Challenge to the old unipolar global order advanced, and in terms of global economics, the balance has tilted, leading to the current multipolar world order. Geopolitical tensions is an understatement in describing the present situation, for as the post-World War II Cold War Entente gave way with the collapse of USSR and Berlin Wall, aggression and invasions by a country on another country, and short wars over borders and disputed territories, proxy wars involving nuclear-capable countries have become more frequent and prolonged. This situation stepped up post 9/11 as the US, NATO, and allied forces continued to pursue their war of terror and the appearance of ISIS and the militant fundamentalists. I forgot to add, what with the setting up of AUKUS by US, NATO, and Australia in the US-led effort to pivot and concentrate its forces in Asia, in Southeast Asia, in the South China Seas. In the face of global economic shifts, saber-rattling and warmongering have become louder, old disputes have become exacerbated, and new challenges and real face-offs are in sway over borders and territories. The expansionism, invasion, and aggression is a far-right agenda, none else. It is incumbent upon us to campaign, struggle, and to stop the wars of expansion and aggression. Thank you very much, Comrade Nalini. I think this is the last.
Thank you so much, Comrade. You're on time, so don't worry about that. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mandite, for the very detailed presentation, but as well as some really good points on how we can consolidate the left in this region as well. Okay, so comrades and friends, if you have questions, please feel free to post in Q&A box. If you have questions to ask, raise your hand, and then I'll call your name, and you can ask question as well. So there are a couple of questions already in the Q&A box. So I think I'll just start by the first round will be based on some clarification respective countries, and then there is some overall general comments or questions as well. So I'll just start with the first question. So from Nisha Kumaravel. Okay, sorry, that is very general one. So I start with the first one. Okay, this is for Comrade Somyot. Is the monarchy in Thailand now much weaker than before? Is there more space?
In fact, cannot speak publicly because we have a very strong law against those people who criticize the monarchy. However, according to the development, you can see that most of the people now applies against monarchy, and especially the young generation that they're growing up and they find out that there is no future and hope for them in terms of economic crisis. And they analyze society that one cause them the problem in the future is also lack of participation in the political power, because of the political power dominated by the bureaucracy and military, that the monarchy support the authoritarian regime. That's why they coming to apply against monarchy. And you can see that almost every month, even though they are not a majority in the main currency of the situation, but still every week that the young people ranking from 11 years old until 20 years old that they came on the street and clashed with the riot police. And now we can say thousands of them were arrested, and many leaders who are now living in the prisons. So that means the people movement is stronger. At the same time, the monarchy is less power now, and facing and confront with the young people who want to reform the monarchy.
Okay, thank you
Yes.
so much. Yeah, Arul, I hope that answers your question. Comrade Somyot, I think there's also one question related, so I'll just take it from Sufyan Ahmad. His question is, how do we address monarchy to the citizens who have been taught loyalty to the king since the first day of school and who continue to believe it until this day?
Can say again? I'm not hearing you.
So the question is, how do we address monarchy to the citizens who have been taught loyalty to the king since the first day of school and who continue to believe it until this day? So how do we address monarchy?
Because of the young people now, especially the high school student and student in university, that they organize in the name of the People Party, something like this, who demand to reform the monarchy. And they said that they want the monarchy can go along with the democracy. That means we need the freedom to express our views and ideas towards the monarchy. So they just come up and speak about monarchy openly and directly, and it's quite effective last year when one university that leading the reform monarchy movement, name is Thammasat University, they succeed to mobilize more than 10,000 people together in university. And of course, this year, the government used the criminal courts to put them in the prison, so that they are now heavy suppressing to those leaders who speak up about the reforming of the monarchy. So we are now under the difficulty to speak up about the monarchy. So the civil society and people organization now collaborate with the young students, launch out the campaign against the less majority law. So now they're collecting the signature to propose to the parliament to reform the freedom of the speech. And they succeed to gather around 200,000 signatures who want to change the law so that we can abolish the less majority law. So this can be the way to open up the space to talk to the monarchy directly. That's now we are moving on this issue. Last month, people also come to the street at the center of Bangkok. More than 10,000 people gathering, and they launch out the campaign to abolish the law. So now this is on the way, and they are going to announce for the big rally next year again to express their demand to abolish the law. But in the domestic, so in our society now, really difficult to speak because the government suppress you strongly. For instance, the international amnesty that campaign to release political prisoners in Thailand, the right wing and the loyalist movement demand the government to get it off the international amnesty in Bangkok, and the government respond to the demands of the conservative wings by try to launch out the law prohibited the NGO, especially the financial support from overseas. So this can affect in the long term for those civil society organizations, particularly with NGO in the future, that they have the support financially from the Westerns in United States or in Europe. So this is the situation at the moment. But hopefully, because of the civil society and the people movement strong enough to fight back in this situation. But we lost so many young leaders who are now have to be political prisoners, even though they are so young at the beginning of 20 years old and have to live as a political prisoner now. Well, hopefully you can go into the international amnesty to take some action, giving solidarity by writing postcards sent to Thai government to release those political prisoners and support moral support to those young students.
Thank you, Comrade. I think this will be the first for all of us to consolidate our solidarity for the youths and students in Thailand, I guess. So please keep support them and their movement. The second, I think I move on to the following question. This is from Jayanat to Comrade Dimitri. Saudara Dimitri, what are the root causes of the chronic disease of authoritarianism in Indonesia that you have described? Dimitri?
Yeah, thank you, Nalini. Thank you for the question, Jayanat. So basically in Indonesia, what we face right now is in certain groups, we face a glorification of military regime. So in Indonesia, we have this kind of meme or mural that's shown in I don't know, either this is organized by those who related to Suharto or not, but in many places we've seen that there is a mural that said Piye kabare penak zaman kuto with Suharto in the picture. In English, it's like, hey, how are you? Are you doing good? It's better on my regime, right? So, you know, that kind of glorification still happen. And in general terms, it's not only on the Suharto, but also on the military. So right now, the Indonesian military are using the phrase of TNI bersama rakyat, or military regime is with the people. So they are trying to say that the military is part of the people and the people is the military, which is totally incorrect. They are trying to reverse the true history of Indonesian independence, which is it's all came through civil society movement, and there is no military effort on that case. So Sukarno, Hatta, a lot of those people who are part in the declaration process are civilian and not military. So this kind of military glorification are one of the root cause of chronic disease of authoritarianism that I'm trying to say previously, because it's still happening, even though it's not on all societies that in Indonesia, but in many cases in rural areas and people with limited access to good education and so on, they are still giving that glorification towards Suharto, or maybe in general term to the military. And that's become a huge problem because in a long term, we can see that it will raise and it will be used by certain groups. We've seen that in many cases, Gatot Nurmantio, one of the Indonesian military chief of staff, are using the glorification of military to put on Indonesian people that the Communist Party of Indonesia (PKI) is wrong, and they are repeating the 65 situation as an example of how bad is the left in Indonesia and how could it impact the life of those who are not leftists. And there is something that horrifying, because people are still believing that the leftists are doing. I mean, yes, there is some scrutiny on that period, but I guess to blame the leftists, the Partai Komunis Indonesia or the Communist Party of Indonesia, it's totally wrong, because it's totally the military operation and the military conflict, internal military conflict, that put Indonesia to the new regime. And it's always being used by the military or those who are trying to impose an authoritarian regime and trying to force out the civic run government. Even though, yeah, in broader term, that our civil society is not strong enough, and it's fragmented with those who are still thinking of a better economic situation, better stability, and so on, because it's the basic of democracy. We're not that stable, of course, but we have that openness and we have the chance to recover in long term. And I guess that is the chronic disease that we're having right now. But after all, the youth are currently consolidating. People are trying to, this youth are trying to make sure that all the reform agenda or their agenda as a youth generation are put forward, and in many cases we're consolidating, as like Manjete said, that the climate change issue is one of the top and one of the most raised issue by the younger generation. Second is the freedom of information, and the third off is gender equality and so on. So even though that there is a chronic disease of authoritarianism in Indonesia, but also there is a counter narrative on the side, on other side, that are trying to push for a more progressive agenda.
Thank you, Comrade. But just one more follow-up from that. So this is from Louise. So she's asking, Dimitri, is it possible for a socialist to win a mayorship or governorship of a major city and implement socialist policies and use the success as a springboard for the presidency?
In Indonesia case, we had the constitutional tools to run as an independent candidate. So here in Indonesia, we had a quite tough electoral, rules that limit only those party who are winning the national election can participate in an election. So you need to have like 300,000 membership. You need to have around 700 brands all over Indonesia and so on, which is, it's quite impossible to run without a good capacity or good funding in that sense. And it's really impossible for the leftist movement right now. I mean, I can see it as for the foreseeable future for the next 5 years to run in that sense, because to have a party right now, we're going to have a Labour Party Indonesia that plan to participate in 2024 election, but yet things are still moving forward. It's still uncertain how it will goes, but the biggest possibilities on the independent candidacy. So it's really possible to have an independent candidate that run in social on the leftist and progressive agenda that gets support by not only the leftists, I guess, but the progressive in general terms. But at the end of the day, it's about how we consolidate, how we can gain enough support from the people to run as a candidate and to win their heart in election. And the next challenge is, even though that we can win the election, because we don't have the local parliament, it's another challenge, because passing the budget, passing the law, and so on, it still depends on the local parliament. So it's still it's still uncertain. If you ask about possibilities, it's always possible. We have all the mechanism in place, and we can run in that sense. But to really govern, I don't see that things happening really soon. It just
Thank you.
It looks like I'm being pessimistic, but yeah, that's the fact.
All right, thank you so much. I'll just pause that for you there now, and then I'm going to go call Zarfan. Zarfan has raised hand. Zarfan, do you have questions? Is there any to any specific speakers? Can the technical team allow Zarfan to speak? Zarfan? Are you there? Okay. All right, I think I'll just read it from the questions here. There are a couple of there are a couple of questions here, very general, but I just I want to ask this to Comrade Mandete. There's a questions on related to this one from Arul. We consider a government which is anti-vaccine as authoritarian, as these anti-vax movements are normally linked to right-wing ideology. Yet there is an argument about big pharmacy and vaccine capitalism. Comrade Manjete, can you take that question?
Yes. Well, the anti-vax position, yes, is not really monopolized by the right. And it is, you might be surprised, there's a section of the anti-vax strain or movement that is actually coming from our wellness people, the people, our health sector, in fact, that has been advocating primary health care and the demand for transparency in the formulation of the vaccines, questioning the safety of the vaccines or the application of the vaccines, because none of the vaccines have passed the test, the clinical trial phase. None of the vaccines, so that rather than expose themselves to the risk of being that percentage in the clinical trial to experience the negative side effects or whatever, they would rather focus on basic care, health care, through ensuring nutrition, boosting immunity, and boosting resistance to all sorts of viruses, not just COVID. So there's that section that they're not really anti-vaxxers. They are this specific anti-COVID vaccines is the only thing that they are rejecting. So the question is whether this is, and then there's another section that outrightly refuses, and they're not necessarily anti-vaxxers, refuses the mandating under penalty vaccinations as a travesty to the rights, to the basic right of the individual. You know, as a young feminist reminded me, my body, my choice. Nobody touches my body unless I decide so. So those are the issues that that you weigh, including the fact that you know, the coronavirus continues to mutate, and now with the, I think it's called something, the new B11526, the new strain that has mutated 10 times, 10 mutations. And they're now, and it's now a virus of concern, and they're trying to determine if it is resistant to all existing vaccines. So really, it's up in the air, and one cannot make any judgment on whether this person or that person is right or right now. It is a matter of concern to all. Um, and it is something that we need to grapple with. My position, our position at this point as an organization is still to move to proceed with the vaccinations because this is all we have for now, along with the assertion that primary health care and continued healthcare in the community level should go hand in hand with the vaccines, along with the testing and then the treatment. I don't know. Was that helpful?
I think that's fine. Comrade, there's one question from your presentation from Jayanat. Please elaborate on your proposal that the left can act as organ of governance for the masses. So it's a clarification.
Yes, yes. I'm sorry. Actually, there's another word. There's one word in the our tradition, the tradition of the left, that can be used to describe what I said, the organs of governance, and that is the one word is Soviet. In Soviet, or the organs of political power that you build at the grassroots level, from the grassroots level, among the workers and peasants, the workers and farmers, and different and other democratic forces. You build the organs, the Soviets, or the organs of governance or political power wherever you can, depending on the levels of your conditions in your country. In Latin America, in South America, they have another term for it: people's councils. People's councils. It where it is not just a sectoral, a sectoral organization, or an organization of the youth, or a multi-sectoral organization, but a nominated and elected council within a specific area, or whether it is in our country it's barangay or a sitio or a larger area where the people set up their elect their council that decides on the entire affair, all the affairs of the citizens or the people who live in that community. Building, that's social, economic, and political. From garbage to health crisis to deciding on representation, setting up choosing who will run in official local government structure, even in the economy, and perhaps even setting up local militia for peace and order and security. That is not necessarily that of government, but legitimate enough because all the people in that place, in that area or community, recognize and acknowledge it. It can be because if I think somebody asked Dimitri about, can a socialist run for mayorship? In my country, we're fielding a socialist running for president. We have elections in May, and our party, the Partido Lakas ng Masa, have decided that in the conditions I mentioned, I described in my presentation, compel us to put forward the alternative to the existing. Many things are up in the air. Our government, I don't know about yours, but our government, and actually many governments, are unable to provide or solve the problem that this multiple crisis has put together. The COVID, the loss of jobs, and the high prices and the scarcity in food, the problems in social service education. And like I said, they're hard to put it back together to make the system work. And this is the time when the socialists like us can have the opportunity to put forward our own alternative. And that is what, and the crisis is so bad that I said that the situation is so dire that this is no time to think twice or be shy. Let's put it out there because the people are looking for the solution to the crisis that we are all facing. And that is where the challenge comes in. We put it out there and we challenge. So when I say organs of governance, I say sometimes it's easier for us when we're more organized at the local level to set it up or even vie in an election at the local level. It makes it easy if we win the seats at the local level in government and have the combined. Do you hear that? Is it me?
Yeah, I think there's someone.
Okay, I
Carry on.
proceed. I'll try to wrap up. The combined the combined authority of a genuinely recognized People's Council represented, and you have captured a local political structure, legal political structure in government. But syempre, of course, as you go higher, it becomes not as easy because that would require a larger and more consolidated organization among ourselves, among the people. But in our case, this business of running a president, we were actually almost running an entire national slate. And we're doing this not just for propaganda. We're doing this because we believe that the conditions are ripe and the people are waiting to hear what we have to say about alternatives, especially our socialist alternatives. And second, the condition is there because this, as I said, globally, capitalism has never been as vulnerable as it is today. But in my country, the factions in the ruling class are sort of in disarray, and truly, there's no real opposition and alternative presenting itself from even among the ruling factions, and this is an opportunity for us. And I believe, I hope, but I believe we're doing the right thing to challenge the far right in this way. We must update you. We must update you as we proceed. The elections is in May. Even before the elections, we believe that something can happen. So I'm hoping I'm answering the question.
Yeah, thank you, and keep us updated. The next question is to Comrade Samyot. There are 3 questions for you. I'm just going to read the first one. Comrade Samyot, for your presentation, they say thank you. On your second point suggestion from your presentation, how do you think Southeast Asia can build international and regional solidarity to create bargaining power of the working class? And are there any examples of this done in the past? This is from Kankasha Chawla.
I think we should try to build up the close cooperation amongst our trade union who are on the left ideology, who believe in working class. So first of all, we have to have the same level of the wages in this region so that we can build up our movement based on the struggle of the working class in the region that have to come together so that the trade union can discuss how we increase our wages, not competing each other in the region in terms of the low wages to bring more investment, but our trade union in the region can propose the worker rights and the political power of the trade union in the region so that we can have the real solidarity in our region. And maybe we have to target in particular country so that every effort and every force and our resource in the region can target to support the struggle of the trade union in particular country. Maybe we can target into Burma or Indonesia, so our trade union in the region can giving support in particular area in the region, so that we, instead of we have support in broader way, but we go into the focus in particular countries so that we can build up the strong trade union movement in that country. This is my idea.
Thank you. There's two more questions, and this is from Thai Yuki. Yuki's first question is like, is it only social movement can change our Thai society? What do you think about many liberal parties without socialist party? And the other question is like, why does Thai workers movement did not come out? So I think Yuki, are you, is it related to the movement, the current protests and everything? Just put it in the Q&A if there's any clarification. Yeah, but that's the question for you, Samir.
The social movement themselves can do something and can participate in the main struggle in the Thai society. But in order to change the structures and to change the relationship between the working class and the capitalist, that not yet in that level of changing, but they can move and they can do something at their own level. It's better than we have nothing in this society, but at least we can see the emergence of the social movement, particularly the young people movement that coming out in the society to do the reform. In the answer of the political party, at least we have the new political party that represent the new generation, represent the progressive thinking, and they are, most of them, they are, even though they are the middle class, but they have the idea to bring the worker to participate in their party. And now this party quite successful in terms of the gaining the parliament seats for the second biggest in the parliament. In the fraction of the opposition political party, they are the second biggest. So this is good enough in terms of the political party. At least we have the news party that we can support and we can confident that they are going and move forward to change society. But of course, in terms of ideology and the willing to change at the root cause of the society, or we want to make liberation to change the power politically, that we need more progressive political party representing the working class. That is not yet we have in this level. And I think this is the answer for the question. Enough? I'm not sure.
I think that should be okay. I think, yeah. Thank you so much, comrade. There's two more questions. This is related to religions. I'm passing this to Saudara Dimitri. Dimitri, there's two questions. The first one is any insights on the correlation between religion and fascism, the far right in the Asian context? Are Asian socialists ready to challenge or re-examine the role of religion as a tool for submission and control, often by governments? And the second question is from Zareen Humaira. The first one is from Nisha. The second is from Zareen. What do you think of the right that use religion for rural areas community? Is it fair to stay in power? They often scare the people with such belief, which the religion in bracket is Islam, would be at risk of the left takes over. So over to you, Saudara.
Yeah, thank you, Nalini. So it's really contextual in Indonesia that the fascism, the dictator, and those authoritarianism regime always use religion as one of its tools to suppress and to maintain order. In our case, religion, Islam is the largest religion in Indonesia, and Islam that is huge control in many things, and it's also implied in our rules and in our culture. In the recent situation, for example, how religion are used by conservative to maintain their power is, for example, the Ministry of Education in Indonesia just enact a new regulation to eradicate sexual crime, sexual misconduct in educational area. But the Muslim conservative wings are protesting it by saying it's a legalization of free sexual activities, which is in Indonesia, as you know, because it's a Muslim majority, it being used that by regulating this inconsensual sexual relation as a sexual crime. The right-wing conservative are interpreting it as a move by those progressive, I would say, as a move to legalize consensual sexual activity. And this kind of narrative, this kind of paradigms is always occur. Not only in this case, previously we had this in terms of LGBTQ plus issues. We're having this also for those who are living in rural areas. Religion are used to say that when your land is grabbed by those capitalists, you need to let go, because you need to be, in Islam it calls like, you need to be ikhlas, or you need to let go in that case. And this kind of narrative are used by religious authorities that are sponsored by this oligarch, this authoritarian regime. So I would like to say that in our case in Indonesia, Partai Hijau Indonesia, for example, we have, I don't know, most of you maybe don't know him. His name is Roy Murtado. He's a progressive left-wing preachers, Islamic preachers that are strongly preaching to re-articulate the interpretation of Islam, the interpretation of Quran, that are progressive in many ways, and it can be used to strongly support the progressive agenda. In terms of LGBT, we got a lot of writings that Muslim did not prohibit it. In many sense, we need to to accept the difference, and we need to understand that above all, humanity is the most important things. That's, for example, in many cases we seen that. So in that context, we need to have a counter narrative, and I see it yesterday. The Dewan Gereja or the Church Council in Papua also creating a statement to say to the central government in Indonesia to stop massacring people in Papua. So religion is not just used; it can be also used by the progressive or the left group, but as a counter narrative, and we need to reinterpret what it's already been written commonly and use that as a counter narrative, so people could also understand the difference. Because in Indonesia, the interpretation of Quran is maintained by a group called MUI. They are maintaining this fatwa, these rules, and so on, so that people need to understand, okay, if MUI said these things is haram or forbidden, so people need to obey. But there is no counter narrative toward that, because there is no one in the Islamic group, or maybe there is no one, those who let's say also preachers, saying different things and giving the interpretation or different interpretation of the text itself, which is really needed to counter that kind of narrative. So religion cannot be used only by those who are in powers, those who are trying to utilize their powers. Because it happens in Indonesia when Ahok, one of governors in Jakarta, he's Christian. He spoke in a event regarding a Quran verse, and it used by several groups as a tools to overthrow him. And he got into jail for 2 years because of people saying Ahok is undignifying Islamic teachings, but it's really incontextual and it's really incorrect, because it's just a tools for those who hate Ahok and sponsored these Muslim conservative groups to create a protest, to create a disorder in our civil society. So things are go through. So in that sense, I hope it's answering, because what is needed. It's not only in Islam. I would like to say that in many senses, it's not in Islam. It's also in Christian, is Buddhism, Hinduism. In many sense that we need to take over this discourse of religion, not only for the use of this right-wing conservative, but also for our progressive agenda. Because there is a theology pembebasan in Indonesia that we know in Christian, that the main focus of Christian teachings is not only about praying to God, but also to help others. So in that sense, it's also Islam. Why we need to build a lot of mosques if people who live within the neighborhood are still poor? So that kind of narrative need to be our front run in taking over the religious discourse, and that's what we need. So I guess I hope that is answering, because it's really contextual in Indonesia. We had this kind of challenge, but many of young preachers like Roy Murtado, like I said, they are trying to create a counter narrative. They are create a lot of writings that try to reinterpret the right-wing conservative groups campaign. I guess that's.
Thanks, Saudara. I think that, yeah, it is a very good response from you. And I think it's also happening in Malaysia. So I think we also need more progressive preacher. I think we need it. There are only 2 questions and we are almost in our end. But there's 2 questions here. I think, so this is general question. So I think anyone can pick. If the people movement is strong, then why is socialism still weak and misunderstood? Anybody? Manjete, yeah, go ahead.
If socialism is strong, why is it still weak? It has not. The struggle for socialism has never been static. Has never been static, and for example, where the far right has appeared in history, no? Let's say in the period of Hitler and Franco and Mussolini, the far right have even used socialism or socialist alternatives or socialist sentiments and demands because the socialist movement was strong at the time. But the struggle for socialism, as I said, it's not static. It is a struggle. No, it is a struggle, and where there is struggle, there's always the matter of the balance, changing the balance of forces in order to be able to win. In order to be able, one has to weaken the other in order to be able to win. Time and again, and it has never been simply socialism keeps losing. Socialism keeps losing. Socialism, the socialist movement or the movement for socialist change has continued to advance. And then it's not a situation of sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Some advances have forced us to take several steps back because we have not changed the balance of forces. And it also reveals how the strength and the capacity of capitalism, no? Not to be resilient, but to weather the crisis that has been occurring throughout the history. I dare say that as I said, this is current crisis of capitalism is one crisis like no other. We have capitalism at its most vulnerable, but it also catches us at a time when, as I mentioned in my presentation, in the 70s and 80s, the collapse of real socialism in Russia and Eastern Europe had occurred, and the left in general globally has went through a period of reflection and coming up with summing up our lessons and learning from our mistakes, so that but by this time, and it's been several decades, I think, with the crisis of capitalism and all that we have learned, and all that we have learned, and all that we have advanced, because it's some advances do not look like the entire world has turned socialist. Advances occur in the struggles of workers, in the struggles of workers in a country, so that we look at the advances and the successes of socialism, the socialist movement in South America. We look at the advances of socialism and advances and step backwards of socialist movements in Europe. And if we look at where we are now, I think the time is ripe for consolidating at this time, precisely because we have learned a lot of things, and for all the controversy over China, I personally believe that socialism is still alive in China, and the possibilities and the prospects of the left, the movement for socialism, now in the period of multiple crises of capitalism, is favorable for us to come together again and make big strides, which is why I say we need to foster internationalism so that we can have exchanges like this. We can have cooperation in the struggles together in the face of pandemic and economic recession. We can do coordinated action together worldwide, and then perhaps we can endeavor to build a new international that will make us even stronger, enhance our capacity to work out a more bigger strides in advancing socialism. I don't know if I answered your question.
You did.
It is a work in progress.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, comrade. I'm going to wrap up the forum for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for your questions. I think I want to wrap up the forum with giving 2 minutes to each speakers with a question from the Philip Wong. So how do we counter the right-wing populists? And just address that in your wrap up, and then you just give us your summary in 2 minutes for each speaker. So I'm going to start with Comrade Somyot, followed by Comrade Manjete, and we will end with Dimitri. Somyot, 2 minutes. You're muted. Unmute you. Somyot, is he there?
Can pass to another person first.
Sure, no problem. All right, okay. Comrade Manjete, 2 minutes, very briefly.
Okay. Okay. What was that question we're supposed to answer? Sorry.
So you just wrap up with the question.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
How do we address the right wing?
Yeah.
We push mass struggles and then stand with the working class in their struggles, and then we organize. We do political organization, and we accumulate our strengths to be able to weaken the far right. We continue to resist, but we organize and we build solid organizations, so we are capable of changing that balance in our favor, and we will get there. Thank you.
Great, that's the spirit. Saudara Dimitri?
Yeah, sure. I would like to say that to counter the right wing, the most important thing is to increase our membership in the left group. I mean, we're in many parts of Indonesia, we're quite small, but every time I talk to a friend of mine, I'll always say that, hey, do you understand that we're currently brainwashed by capitalists to think that we need to work for them, work harder, and only get paid, but there is nothing else. And I always preach that you need to realize that those capitalists are taking a shit out of us, but we're getting nothing from them. So we need to fight back, and we need to unify our forces, and that's kind of conversation need to be our all-day conversation. We need to talk it out to anyone, not only within our peers, not to our group, but to anyone that we know, to our family, to our relative, to our colleague, to our working friends, so on. So those who are I would say progressive or have a left-leaning thinking would increase in terms of number, and in a certain point we can have that bargaining power to regain a political power, and for sure we can run a government. And as the question asked before, can we run as a mayor and so on? Yes, if we have the power, if we already consolidate, and if we have the support from all people within our peers. So I guess that's to wrap up. And we do not fear that authoritarian regime will come up. I guess no, Indonesia, and it will not come as long as that we have this group, we have this consolidating power to fight that back. I guess that's as my closing statement. Thank you, Nalini. Thank you, Manjit.
Thank you, Dimitri. Comrade Somyot, your final few words.
Now it's the time to change, and the time coming together with us, and we can overcome everything we confront today, and because of now the economic crisis under the capitalism, need our socialists to overcome and build up the new society, and now it's the time for all of us to change together with the new generation that already come on the street and emerging in the society and has the task in the history to build up new society to replace the old society.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, comrades. Please stay outside. I know there's a persecution against you, but we hope that everything will go well, and then you will challenge it, and we will win in that fight as well. Comrades, this is the end of it. Thank you again for the speakers, participants, organizers, technical team, all the volunteers who provided the interpretation service. Thank you so much.